Welcome to the Monday show. It was an exciting weekend with Pro Tour Aether Revolt going on. I've been cheering on Mr. Travis Wizard all of day one. Well, it happens to be Friday while I film this, so hopefully Monday someone will report in the comments that he won the whole thing. I'm cheering for you, buddy. And today's episode is two-part. One, I'm going to talk a little bit about the coverage from Pro Tour Aether Revolt. And two, I'm going to talk a little bit about vintage with somebody who knows an awful lot about vintage, Mr. Randy Buehler. So I want to start and first give huge props to the entire crew involved with the Pro Tour coverage. The transitions were smooth. The video was good. The set looked great. The coverage overall, significantly better than the last. And that's all you really want out of a coverage team is it's not going to change overnight, but you really want incremental improvement, right? So the next time, next Pro Tour, I'm going to expect it to be a little bit better. I want to outline a few things that I liked. Obviously, the aesthetics, the looks, and some of the things that I thought I wanted to get your opinions on. So the overall look and feel of it, the visual presentation, the transitions were all pretty good. Significantly more interesting to watch, less boring dead time, a lot more people to listen to, a lot of different things to talk about, more individual team coverage. Overall, I can't say enough good things about the work the people on and off camera of the Pro Tour did. There's a few things nitpicky that I'm going to mention that personally I thought could be better, but overall I really like the direction this is going. Will Magic ever be an esport? No, of course not in my opinion, but I think that doesn't preclude it from putting on a great show that can be a profit center for Wizards of the Coast. First of all, the jerseys, I totally understand why they do it. I still think it looks dumb. Magic isn't a sport. They should, I would totally get behind team polos or team shirts, but the jerseys, in my opinion, look foolish. But if the players like it, who am I to judge, right? Like, I don't really care what they wear. But a jersey is important when I'm watching a team sport and there's 10 people in, the same general area. It makes it easy to determine who's on what team. But in a one-on-one event, it's really not as important to me. I'm interested to hear what you think about the jerseys, okay? Again, I know I'm being a curmudgeon. I don't want you to hate them just because I think they're kind of silly. I want to hear your genuine feedback about the jerseys. One thing that I think could really go, though, unless I'm wrong, is the headsets on the feature match. I mean, you're not playing a computer game. Why in the hell are you wearing a headset with a cheap mic dongle? I mean, what is that for other than purely as a prop? Now, if they're getting cues from coverage or something, okay, but I'm pretty sure it's there just as a look. And I can't imagine them being like, hey, guess what, Jeremy? We're going to put you on the feature table, but can you put these fake headphones on that aren't connected to so we can look like an esport? I mean, it's not fooling anybody. So I would say get rid of that, in my opinion. But again, I'm interested in what your opinion is on that more than mine because our opinions are equal. I'm just one kind of curmudgeonly guy, and you all are more consumers of the coverage than I probably am. I watch it with a different mindset. I'm judging it constantly, all the little things that I think could be better, and I realize that makes the experience a little different for me. Some things I did like was the introduction of the advantage bar, which tried to show which player had the advantage at any given time. I didn't find it very helpful in general because it's just like this little bar that kind of moved around. It appeared to be arbitrarily, but I think they're just testing the idea here. And if I can make any suggestion to the Pro Tour team, what I think they're trying to do here is implement some of the aspects of poker where you can see like, oh, he's a 79% chance to win this hand. I actually think I would prefer a percentage, even if it's an estimate, because where the bar is on the screen is kind of not really relevant. Depends how big your monitor is. If you're watching it on a TV, I mean, a percentage would be probably better in my opinion. But again, how do you calculate that accurately? I don't know. What did you all think of the advantage bar? And I'm also curious, what were some things that you liked about coverage. Where were some areas that you think they could improve? I think keeping it constructive would be good. I mean, you can have personal opinions about certain people on coverage. I don't really have strong opinions about anybody on coverage. I think they're probably all underpaid. So I can't really complain if they're not amazing at their jobs. But the core crew, I have always been pleased with. I do miss Randy, but I think he's moved on to other things. And in fact, awesome segue me. I'm going to move to a conversation I had with Randy about his very own show. He's got his very own show running on the Wizards Twitch channel, and it's called Vintage Super League. But I tried to get the conversation really to help edify people on Vintage and to get the kind of the straight dope from the guy that's running it, who knows the format. And I thought the interview was great, very informative. And I hope you enjoy it too. And in fact, I'm going to kick it over to that here in a second. But Wednesday's show is all queued up. I'll be filming that this weekend too. I'm going to be talking about toxic game stores. I think that's going to be a fun video. And I hope you're enjoying the more scheduled, structured show episode schedule. The views and dislike ratio appears to show that you are enjoying it. So let's kick it over to Randy and I talking about Vintage. Boy, that was a really positive outlook, but tiny update. If you don't follow me on social media, then you may not know that MTG headquarters was permanently banned from the official Wizards of the Coast Twitch chat. Why was he banned? Well, for cheering for a friend who is competing in the Pro Tour. Saturday, I was watching the Pro Tour and interacting very graciously. I broke no rules. I was talking with fans, cheering on my friend who is competing in the Pro Tour. And the reason I didn't publish that video to the YouTube channel is I don't want to make problems for this person, but it's a friend of mine who is a professional player, and I have every right to cheer for this person. And might I say, most of the chat all weekend was cheering for this person. Yet I was permanently banned within 2 minutes of being in the chat. Coincidentally, moments after I was banned, a moderator cleared the chat. Now, I don't know if this is something the moderators at Wizards of the Coast often do, and maybe there's nothing to it. Maybe they clear the chat all the time. But before I could grab a screenshot showing how cordial and kind I was being, I could only capture a small section in which I'm interacting with a fan, saying hello. There's a short list of people that use the tiny bit of power they have in the Magic the Gathering community to enforce their political vendettas on people. And in this case, I'm pretty sure it was either Elantris or Trick Jarrett, based on who was moderating the chat at that time. I received 0 warnings. I broke 0 rules. I received 0 timeouts. I was permanently banned for existing and interacting in chat. Because of this, I will never watch another Wizards of the Coast stream, period. And that really sucks because now I can't wholeheartedly stand by all the positive things I said about it. And I did this great interview with Randy Buehler about his show, which is unfortunately on the Wizards of the Coast Twitch channel. Now I'm going to leave that video up. I really considered deleting it. I really considered just replacing his segment with one of the hundreds of other video ideas I have. But as far as I know, Randy and I are good, and I'm a man of my word. I told him I would be happy to promote his show, and Randy and I are good. I just personally will not watch it on Twitch. Wizards of the Coast, again, lets personal politics get in the way of selling cardboard. If only the people there could realize that what they do best is make the absolute best card game in the world and focus on that rather than personal vendettas and forcing their personal ideologies out on people, maybe more people would be interested in watching the streams. But when I saw people getting banned left and right, and I took a look at mods like the Manosaurus and Elantris and Magic the Amateuring, people who are well documented for blocking people at any sign of disagreement on Twitter and other areas, I'm not surprised this has now bled into their Twitch chat. Not a lot of people, not a large percentage of people that watch your Twitch streams participate in chat, but I happen to be one of those people, and a lot of people like to. What I would highly recommend WOTC do is just not have chat available at all, as opposed to constantly banning people who they don't like, agree with, or spending time fun policing people, protecting feelings. Sorry to have to be negative here, but I'm very disappointed. I'm not surprised, but I'm very disappointed in the block culture of a company who should worry more about dwindling F&M attendance than meanies in their Twitch chat. Nonetheless, here's an interesting conversation about vintage I had with someone who seemed to me like a very nice guy and who knows a hell of a lot about vintage. Okay, well, we have a special guest today. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Randy Bueller.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So you agreed to come on and talk about some vintage, and it's a topic that I don't know a lot about, but clearly you're very passionate about. So I figured I would do 5 questions with Randy on vintage. So I'll start off with kind of a softball because I know a lot of people on my channel, they might know about vintage, but even myself, I'm not super clear on everything about it. So could you explain a little bit about maybe what vintage is to somebody who already knows, who already plays Magic?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, vintage is the format where you can play all the cards that have ever been printed. I mean, when Magic first came out, 1993, Richard Garfield and those guys didn't have a great handle on power level. And so there are some cards from Alpha, from the very first Magic set, that are just kind of off the charts too powerful. And I mean, these are the iconic sort of legendary cards from back in the day, right? Black Lotus, the Moxes, Ancestral Recall, cards like that. Now, in a lot of Magic formats, you can kind of only play the more recently printed cards, right? Standard is the last 2 years worth of cards. Modern is the last, 10 or 12 or 15 years worth of cards, whatever it is. Even Legacy is all the way back to the beginning of time, but there's a banned list in Legacy. The key thing about vintage is there's no banned list. I mean, technically there is a banned list. You can't play anti cards and dexterity cards, but the most powerful cards, nothing is banned for power level. Instead, things are restricted. So vintage has a restricted list. There's a bunch of cards that you're limited to only playing a 1 copy of, but that means you get to play with 1 Black Lotus, 1 Ancestral Recall, 1 of each Mox, etc. And it means this is the format where you get to feel the most power coursing through your veins. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to play only vintage. I wouldn't want that to be the only Magic format you ever play. I mean, sometimes, you can't live on just candy,
I beg to differ.
But it's awesome. It's awesome. And I mean, I love shuffling up vintage decks. And I think vintage, you can play a lot of vintage because there are a lot of interesting things going on in the format. And, you can kill people on the first turn, but it actually turns out it doesn't happen very often. So that's the big picture context.
Yeah, I like it. That's perfect. That's it's almost as if you're a huge fan of the format.
Almost.
Could you talk about, question 2 would be, could you talk about some of your favorite decks? Like, what are the decks that you like to play? When people ask me about vintage, I can say that there's Belcher, And
Sure.
that's something that is often recommended to me to start off with, but I don't know the meta that well. So what are some of the decks you like?
Sure. So the metagame nowadays in Vintage, I think, breaks down as there's some very sort of disruptive decks that they tend to be Mishra's Workshop decks, but since the Eldrazi have been printed, they aren't necessarily Mishra's Workshop decks. But their goal is to just make the opponent's life miserable, playing cards like Thorn of Amethyst, maybe Sphere of Resistance or Thalia, cards that just make everything the opponent is trying to do more expensive. And, those sort of workshop decks or Eldrazi decks have got an almost prison vibe to them, if you know that archetype from way back in the day. So that's kind of one pillar of what's going on. Then there are the Mentor decks. Monastery Mentor is insane in Vintage. There's so many cheap blue cantrips that have been printed over the years that you essentially just play every blue cantrip you can get your hands on. Some of them are restricted, but there's enough to sort of fill your deck with all these cards. Gush works out to be great because you play islands as your mana base. Now suddenly Gush makes mana and draws cards, and when you get to play the card Monastery Mentor, you just get to explode with this ocean of tokens. That is, assuming the opponent doesn't have a Thorn of Amethyst in play, making you pay extra for all your cards. So Mentor is definitely one of the pillars of the format. Then there's Combo. And you asked me, what do I prefer? I like it when I can play a combo deck. I like working out the sort of long, complicated chains of cards that can result in super quick kills. I like trying to kill my opponent on the first turn. It's fun. It's still fun to kill the opponent on the first turn. It just is. And I mean, it wouldn't be if it happened all the time, but you look at something like Vintage Super League, which is the place I play the most Vintage, and I think we went like 100 matches before we had a first turn kill. And, 5 seasons of that league, there've only been like half a dozen of them. It can happen. It's this constant looming threat. But the combo decks, they're usually storm kill decks. They're normally play a bunch of spells and then kill my opponent with Tendrils of Agony. That can be a Dark Ritual-based combo deck. Nowadays, that's actually what the Paradoxical Outcome deck does. So Paradoxical Outcome getting printed in Kaladesh kind of introduced this new variant to the Storm Kill combo decks in Vintage. Combo decks, though, could also be a Belcher kill, right? If you have – that one doesn't kill with Storm. That's just – I have Goblin Char Belcher. I have a mono blue deck with my only land is Tolarian Academy. So I can get the Belcher. I can dump a bunch of artifacts. Academy's ridiculous. Kill my opponent in one shot with Goblin Char Belcher. The other cool combo deck, and this is probably the coolest deck in Vintage, is the Doomsday deck. Doomsday is BBB to go through your entire library and graveyard, pick 5 cards, everything else gets exiled, and you get to make yourself a 5-card library. And that's a lot of power. That is a tremendous amount of power. Typically, that deck will kill with a Laboratory Maniac. Like, you have your 5-card deck, but it's got an Ancestral Recall and a Gush, and you just draw your entire library and kill them with Laboratory Maniac. Hopefully this run can play to the Doomsday. That deck is super complicated and super hard, but that one's probably the most fun. I definitely enjoy right now I've been playing Paradoxical Outcome Storm. That deck's been fun to mess around with. I think it's very good. Doomsday is probably the deck I've had the most fun with in the last 5 or 10 years. You want to go way back in the day, though. I mean, I used to play Necro decks. The card Necropotence is just always been near and dear to my heart. Like, trading my life as a resource, turning it into cards. That's how I won the Pro Tour that I won back in the 90s. And that was my Vintage deck back in the 90s as well.
That reminds me of kind of watching Vintage. To me is like I equate to watching people who are really good at shooting pool. And like a table run is one of those things where like almost like a turn 1 kill where when everyone's good enough to have a table run, but it still doesn't happen that often. You still appreciate it when it does.
Yeah, and Force of Will is the reason it doesn't happen all that often, right? The majority of the decks have Force of Will. Basically, you either need to have Force of Will, or you need to have Thorn of Amethyst in your deck, or you need to be killing your opponent in the first 2 turns. Like, you have to be doing one of those things. And ideally, maybe 2 of them. Like, some of the combo decks also have Force of Will. And,
Interesting.
I mean, there's some Dredge running around, too, but that's kind of in the I can kill you on turn 2 category.
So
anyway, yeah, Force of Will keeps people from killing each other on turn 1 all the time, and Mental Misstep contributes to that as well.
Interesting. So let me ask how. So question 3: How can people get into Vintage without selling organs?
The cards all live on Magic Online nowadays. Vintage Masters was printed, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, probably 4 years ago at this point. And, that introduced all of the true power cards, right? The Black Lotuses, the Moxes, all those cards now exist on Magic Online. And I think more Vintage gets played on Magic Online nowadays than gets played in paper. I mean, it's hard to know the stat. Yeah. It's hard to know the stat on that, but any given time you log into Magic Online, you can get a pickup game of Vintage in the open constructed room. It's just, if you want to play Vintage, you can just throw down with somebody. There are daily events. You'll get like a dozen people will get together, in the evening and play out a tournament on Magic Online. So I mean, it's not one of the bigger Magic Online formats, but it is big enough that there's this critical mass of players who've gotten the cards, and then the cards turn out. You can acquire those cards significantly cheaper, like an order of magnitude cheaper than you can get the paper version of the deck.
So leading into my question 4, which is addressing the other side of it, how does Randy Buehler view proxies? What do you think as a Vintage player? When I talk to most Vintage players, they're like, "Hey, I just want to play." But some people have some specific feelings about them, and so I figured, what a great person to ask.
Look, I just want to play. At the same time, obviously, Wizards of the Coast has made this amazing game, and I mean, I don't use proxies. It helps that I've been playing since the 90s, and I have the cards from back in the day. I mean, I've certainly played in my fair share of, 5 proxy tournaments, 10 proxy tournaments.
I guess that's what I kind of meant, right? Yeah, sorry, I should have said, like, I have these tournaments used to exist. And I don't want to put you in a weird spot, not necessarily how you feel about, any corporate rules around it. But if you played against somebody sitting across from you who have proxies, how would, how do you feel about that?
It doesn't really bother me at all. I mean, I've played in my fair share of those tournaments. I just like to play. I mean, personally. And, I used to work for Wizards of the Coast. I still do a fair amount of contracting with Wizards of the Coast, like for, consulting on events. And, the Super League is I run is on their channel. So, I mean, still have a very good relationship with Wizards. But, I mean, it's not like I'm employed or sort of bound by their current policies. I mean, I get that proxy tournaments are a way to make the format more accessible to people. And obviously the Vintage in particular, super hard to make accessible. It's funny. I think Magic Online is the reason you don't see as many of those tournaments running around. I mean, some of it is, Wizards cracking down and enforcing their intellectual property rights, which is totally their right to do. But I mean, a lot of it is also just go play on Magic Online. Like, you can play. The format is more accessible now than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, as an example, I think you can look at Power 9 as, like, most of that stuff's under $100. Is that fair to say, or has it gone back up? I feel like Moxes were sub 100 for a long time.
Oh yeah, they still are. I mean, I think they're more like 40, 50. I mean,
yeah, you can buy dual lands for a few bucks. I remember that too.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that market in months, but I mean, yeah, the Black Lotus was over 100 tickets to trade for, but nothing else was.
Well, and put into keep a perspective, there was a time where like Baby Jace was $40 or $50 even online. I feel like so. It's not, it's like you said, it is an order of magnitude more affordable, and there are Vintage decks that just don't play Black Lotus or some of the more expensive cards. So you can, and Belcher must be one of them. That must be why people are always telling me to play that. I
mean, Dredge is typically the cheapest deck to get in with. I know that's true in paper. I think it's true online as well.
Okay, cool. Well, my final question is going to be, where can people, you've mentioned the Vintage Super League. Tell me a little bit about that. Tell me where people can watch it, and maybe share some history, because I'm kind of an old, I mean, not as old as you, obviously, but I'm an old Magic player, right? I started in Revised, and so Randy Buehler to me is kind of a household name. And when you started VSL, I watched it, even though I don't fully understand the format. And so, but when I talk to people, when I was asking people like, hey, what should I ask Randy? And not everyone, you're not in front of the camera as often anymore now. And so I'm really interested in to hear how the Vintage Super League started, and how you were able to keep it going after you were less permanently. I mean, I think that there's something to be said for that. Like, keeping VSL going after you did less work for Wizards was pretty impressive.
I mean, I have done a lot of event coverage over the years, so that's certainly the perspective I'm coming from. I mean, like I actually come from a family of journalists. Like my parents owned a newspaper when I was growing up, so
Oh, okay.
I always look for ways to tell stories. That's just I see myself as kind of a storyteller, and I love Magic. I love talking about Magic. When Wizards announced that Vintage Masters was coming out on Magic Online, I instantly knew I was going to play the hell out of the set. I was going to hope it was a good draft format, but whatever. I was going to acquire the power cards. I was going to get myself the ability to play Vintage Online. And I kind of wanted to find a way to play that for higher stakes, to put not played for money, but just play for pride, right? Get together a group of, essentially Magic celebrities is what I've always gone for with that. At the same time, because I was doing a lot of event coverage, going to Grand Prix and Pro Tours and whatnot, I felt like Twitch was becoming a big part of the Magic community. And I felt like there was a way between Magic Online and Twitch, it ought to be possible to make a cool show. A lot of it was me trying kind of playing around with ideas about how do you tell a compelling story? How do you tell a compelling story? How do you get people invested in a Twitch stream such that they want to come back? And, I kind of designed the Vintage Super League season to play out over the course of a couple of months where hopefully it's almost like got a reality TV show bent to it, right? Hopefully you tune in, you get invested in the characters, and then you come back the next week because you want to see what happens, right? And we get these narrative arcs that play out over the course of a couple of months, kind of half sports season, half, reality TV show.
Great way to approach it too. Very smart, I think. Yeah, that's, how do you turn Twitch? I think if, ultimately you're working towards it, but as you continue to refine that question alone, right. That's how you have a hit show, really. And it just happens to take place online.
Twitch and Magic Online seemed like this obvious marriage. And, the problem I think with Grand Prix coverage a lot of the time is it's this one-off event, right? And Grand Prix are a big deal. They're awesome to play in. You've got thousands of players. But from a spectator point of view, you don't necessarily know who's going to show up, right? Is Finkel going to go? Every once in a while, John's going to go to a Grand Prix, but you don't count on that. And, you tune in and, okay, there's this set of players at the Grand Prix, but then by Sunday, somebody has won and everybody has kind of gone home again. So there's no narrative arc, right? There's a one-off event and somebody wins and then that's the whole story. So I definitely wanted to see if I could build something that would be fun to kind of watch on an ongoing basis. And yeah, so I basically, I was at the Pro Tour and I went around to the people that I thought had some interest in Vintage. Luis Scott Vargas was the first guy I went to. I'm like, I'm thinking about doing this. And he was just instantly like, in. Sounds great. That's another guy. He doesn't go all the way back to the the 90s like I do, but he's been playing Magic forever. He's been playing Vintage for well over a decade. He would play at local games shop. The shop was it Eudaimonia? The shop in the Bay Area where Luis kind of grew up. He played Vintage tournaments, and sure. David Ochoa would be there playing Vintage as well. So he was a guy I went to. He was in, and then it just kind of snowballed, right? I just asked a bunch of my friends, Bob Maher, Chris Papula, guys who I knew had played Vintage way back in the day, and they wanted in. So, we put the initial cast together. Initially, we launched it. It was on my channel, and it just immediately went up into the thousands of viewers, concurrent viewers. And we moved it over.
By the way, sorry to interrupt you, but which is no small feat in the Magic sphere on Twitch. We play in this little smaller fishbowl, but that's like having tens of thousands of viewers on Hearthstone or something like that. That's thousands is a ton for a stream in Magic.
Yeah, concurrent. So we were instantly the biggest midweek content. Like the only Magic streams that get more viewers than the Super Leagues are essentially Pro Tours and Grand Prix and
sure.
Star City events. The big weekend tournaments are kind of what the Magic streaming on Twitch revolves around. Star City does really well. Star City actually does better than the Grand Prix, but then the Pro Tours are the biggest thing. And like Kenji Egashira, Numat the Nummy, is the biggest streamer. And he'll be in 4 digits nowadays. Back then when we started VSL, I feel like he would get to 1,000 on a typical stream, but he wouldn't really get much over 1,000. Every once in a while he'd be if he was playing a Pro Tour qualifier on the weekend and he made the top 8, he would get, a couple of thousand people watching him, which was awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think Super League sort of fell into this spot where, okay, it's only once a week, but yeah, we would get 3,000 concurrent viewers, 4,000 concurrent viewers, and it's the biggest midweek content around for Magic.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And tell me about this season a little bit. Tell me about who do we have on cast this season and how's it going?
Sure. So we just start at the beginning of January, we started with the play-in tournament. So this is a thing we started last season where we've always had this thing. Like I said, we wanted to play for stakes. I'll take a step back and sort of tell the story with a little more context. We decided with the original group that we wanted to make sure everybody took it seriously and, was playing to win, even though we're also kind of hanging out, right? It's almost got this, fantasy sports vibe to it. Like we're on a fantasy football league together, and you're kind of busting each other's chops, and it's with friends and people, but you kind of want to win because
you're so competitive. Yeah, right.
Oh yeah, for sure. You can't get this group of people together and not have it be competitive. And, I definitely made an effort initially. I wanted a couple of guys from the vintage community. So that was Steve Menendian and Rich Shea. And I wanted, some current platinum pros, and I wanted some sort of old school pros. And I wanted just, kind of ringer celebrities. David Williams is a great fit for that, But we set it up where, okay, sure, somebody's going to win and there's going to be some prizes. But if you finish last, you're out. So we have relegation. Whoever finishes last at the end of the season doesn't get invited back to play the next season. And that's a big deal.
That's
like,
a
sure,
stake,
people want to win, but really what you want to do is you want to avoid last. So the race for not last can be as compelling as the race to actually win the thing. We had this thing in season 4 where we wound up with this massive, like, 5-way tie for last place. And so what we started was a play-in tournament. We're like, okay, fine. We're not just going to kick all 5 people out. We're going to have a tournament where there's 5 spots on the line. And so everybody who finished last gets to go to the play-in tournament. And then we invited other people that it might have been cool to bring into the league. And so we had this play-in tournament. This year, the play-in tournament, we only had one person finish last. So but we also expanded the league by 2 spots. So we had 3 spots in our play-in tournament, which just finished as we're recording this. We started at the beginning of January. Oliver Tew won a spot in the league. Kid's like 18 years old. Maybe he just 19. He's like 5 years younger than Magic. It's just crazy. Like if you put the following 3 things in order, it goes: Randy wins the Pro Tour, Tempest is released, then Oliver Tew is born. What? So yeah, we've got this kid who's way younger than the cards in the league coming up. So he won a spot in the first week of our play-in tournament. Then Rodrigo Tagores won the second week. This is a European ringer. This is Eternal Specialist. He won a Legacy Grand Prix with a Storm deck that is just – I think that's one of the best matches I've ever seen to win a big event like that. You go back and watch his Legacy GP win. Just a masterclass in the final game he managed to win with the Storm deck. So he plays a lot of Legacy, plays a lot of Vintage, and, yeah, crushed our tournament with a Leovold deck, actually. Which is kind of cool.
Well, which is why that card's like $80 now out of Conspiracy or whatever.
It is very relevant to Eternal formats, and it's tricky in Vintage just to get the mana right. Like, you can get a lot of fast mana in Vintage, but it's like off-color moxes. It's hard to get 3 different colors immediately. But I don't know, his deck looked good. So then the last new player this year is actually Rachel Agnes. She won the LCQ, the Last Chance Qualifier, which ended on Tuesday, and she's been playing great. She's been really awesome, both on commentary and gameplay so far. So it's also, I mean, look, it's nice to have a woman in the league. I like getting all kinds of different perspectives.
There's no denying that. Yeah, there's really no denying that. Yeah, I'm not, and it helps that she's also pretty damn good too.
Oh yeah. No, I've been impressed. I think she's certainly, I mean, not just held her own, but I mean, she earned it. She played great.
So I do enjoy that part of it too.
Say again?
I enjoy that people who are there earned their way in, because I think, like, I remember there was a lot of, hullabaloo about special invites on the Pro Tour or whatever that was, which I think were fine to promote it, but like with your group of players, there's no I mean, hey, they've earned it. Everyone that's there has earned their spot,
Yeah, no, I think that play-in tournament, it serves a nice role there. You get to sort of let people try it out. I get to sort of offer invites to a broad number of people, a bunch of different perspectives, but then ultimately you can't get in the league unless you can actually win at that level. So that's been cool. The regular season is scheduled to start on February 7th. So we never play the Tuesday right before the Pro Tour, since so many of our players are over in Dublin. They're in Ireland. They're getting ready to play the PT. Yeah. So week 1 will be February 7th, and I want to get back in the field. I'm tired of talking about Vintage. I want to play some.
Yeah,
I'm particularly excited about it.
Well, this great timing, because this video will come out probably Wednesday next week, which will be perfect time to be reminding people. So if they follow the Magic Twitch channel, or you, Randy Bueller, on Twitter. I always see you
Yep.
tweeting out links when it's going live and stuff like that.
Right. So I am R Bueller on Twitter. That is, I think, the best way to keep up with Vintage Super League, because I'm always going to warn people ahead of time. I like to hype the stream a day or two ahead of time, let people know what's going on, and as we get through the event as well. So just follow me at R Bueller. In addition, the show's pretty easy. It's Tuesday nights at 5 o'clock Pacific. Like, if you want to watch the live stream, it's on Magic's Twitch channel. So that's twitch.tv/magic. Tuesdays at 5, we've basically kept that start time for all 6 seasons and counting now. I mean, we used to start at 6, but other than that 1-hour shift, it's basically always been Tuesday nights. You can also catch up on YouTube. Like, every episode we've done, every match that's been played over the course of 5, we're into our 6th season now, is on YouTube. Most of them are on the Wizards Magic's YouTube channel. There's a playlist. It's in order. You just start at the beginning and keep watching. So there's that. Yeah, it's a ton of content at this point that I think it ages pretty well. Like, you can still go back and watch Vintage from 3 years ago, and it's still pretty cool. I mean, you'll see that our production value is maybe not so cool. It took us a little while to sort of figure out the best way to do things. I'm really happy with the production values in the show right now, though. I mean, Jeffrey Palmer from Living Cards MTG has been doing animations for us.
Noticed that. The Mox animations are ridiculous. Yeah, they're so good.
Yes. That's all him.
I think the Ruby has the Shivan Dragon in there, and I feel like, is Abu Jafar in there too? Is that? No?
It's Ali from Cairo.
Ali from Cairo, yes, yeah. I love the old Shivan Dragon art. I'm partial to that as well. Yeah, it's very cool, and hopefully it'll be a lot like when people discover a show and then they realize that it's 4 seasons in, and then they can just binge watch.
Oh yeah.
Coming up to February 7th. Is that what you said?
Tuesday, February 7th.
Tuesday, February 7th. Tune in. Any spoilers? Who's playing that day?
Well, I do want to give one more props. Jeffrey's been doing a great job with animations, but I have to give credit to Athena Froelich. She's the producer nowadays. She's sort of taken over the tech side on the back end for, I guess she's in her 3rd or 4th season now, and she's just been spectacular. She's definitely, in terms of, as you watch Magic try to turn more and more into an esport, and people are trying to put good production value shows together and videos together, she's right on the cutting edge of that. So she's been great to work with too.
I do. I have to give her props too, because the streams come a long way, and even me, who's a casual streamer, you guys clearly recognize that it needs to be at that level to keep people interested and watching. Sure, there's that hardcore just show me the cards and shut up viewer, but then there's a lot more people like me who are like, I want to be entertained too, like make me laugh or have cool animations. And so shout out to her, and really the whole team, and you for keeping it all together. And thanks again for coming on and chatting Vintage with me, and hopefully we'll see a nice little spike in viewers.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Thank you.
Cheers.